We're done with hemoglobin and myoglobin now. We did it thoroughly, and we need to finish off this chapter by talking about a couple of other types of proteins and their functions. Let's just back up for a moment and reflect that we have already discussed globular water-soluble proteins. It's a particular class of proteins like hemoglobin and myoglobin that float around in a aqueous environment like the blood or inside cells. Turns out there's lots of other types of proteins in different environments, and we can refer to those that are structural, fibrous proteins. That's what I want to talk about in this video. And in our next video, and last for this chapter, we'll talk about membrane proteins. So we're going to use as an example for a structural fibrous protein, the protein shown below called collagen. And collagen is found in skin and bones in your body, and it therefore has a structural purpose. Its job is not to float around in the blood. Its job is not to be involved with membranes. Its job is to hold tissues together and to give them great strength. Now, collagen has a very different tertiary structure. And it doesn't have a globular type of a tertiary structure, and it doesn't have nonpolar inside and polar on the outside like we talked about earlier. It's a very different type of molecule. In fact, like you would expect for something that's structural, it has great strength. Now, this protein has 3 chains that twist up on themselves, and you can think of this very much like 3 strands of a rope. If we have 3 peptide chains and they are wrapped and coiled around each other, that gives them strength, just like strings brought together and wrapped around each other make a rope and give them strength. So we have what's called great tensile strength in these fibers. Now, this is an actual protein structure we have shown here in sticks, but it actually goes on for 1,000 amino acids approximately. It's a very long protein. We couldn't show it on the entire page. So 3 strands are stronger than 1, and that's what we see here. Now, this protein is is coiled on itself in a helix, but it's not an alpha helix. In fact, it's what we call a collagen triple helix. I'll show you the real structure in 3 dimensions in class, which we can't do here, but we can do with the computer in front of us. But let's talk about the collagen triple helix. Here's the better view of it down here. What we can say is that it has a repeating pattern of 3 amino acids over and over again. And those 3 amino acids are right here. Let's go ahead and write them down. We have a glycine, followed by a proline, followed by another proline. And these 3 amino acids, glypro-pro, simply repeat themselves over and over again hundreds of times until you get out to about 1,000. And what happens is these basically coil up on themselves in this collagen helix, and we can see that up here. You can even see that the prolines are facing outward. Now, let's think about this a little bit. Prolines are rigid. They don't have very much flexibility. That gives great strength to these fibers. They are also very nonpolar. And the nonpolar prolines are facing outward, which is not what we saw with other proteins. And this makes the protein water insoluble. Isn't that what you want for your skin and your bones? You don't want those tissues to dissolve in water. It would be a problem every time you took a shower if it did. So we're going to repel water because we're coating with nonpolar on the outside. Lastly, what about these glycines? The glycines face inward. And because they're small, they allow the strands to pack close together. That gives great strength as well. Those prolines are going to be on the interior here, and that allows the strands to come very close together and pack really tightly. Okay, that describes the structure of collagen, but one more thing about how it comes together in your body. There are actually modifications that occur on the prolines. We end up with alcohol groups being attached to form what we call hydroxyproline, and that forms a place for crosslinks. By putting a hydroxyl group on there, that's somewhat reactive, and you can actually cross-link strands together. Think about what that would be like. Let's say we have fibers of collagen lining up like this, and they are forming sort of a linear array of fibers. That gives even more strength. But if we can cross-link them, then you get even greater strength. And this is what happens with bones. With skin, the fibers tend to crosshatch like this, almost like a fabric. But fabric that's not interwoven together is going to fall apart. So again, we make these cross links between the fibers, and that's what gives your skin sort of a flexible ability to move in all different directions, much like a piece of cloth could flex in different directions. So we get great strength, but different types of tissues out of different ways that these collagen fibers are brought together. There are other types of fibrous proteins. Maybe you've heard from biology, proteins like actin, fibrinogen, microtubules. These are all proteins that have some structural role, and they tend to be long and thin and relatively insoluble in water. So let's just leave it at that for now as an example of structural fibrous protein, and go on to the last class, membrane proteins.